This is the quiz review assignment for Chapter 8. We're going to start on number 34, which is a graphing problem. They give you 2x squared minus 12x plus 23. So you need to find your vertex first. That you do by saying x coordinate is negative b over 2a. 4ac minus b squared over 4a is going to be your y coordinate, or you can always just plug in your x coordinate into this equation once you find it and get your y that way. So negative b over 2a in this case is going to be, here's your b is negative 12, so don't forget it's negative 12 all over 2a, which is 2, and a is 2 in this case. This will be 12 over 4, so this negative and this negative will cancel out. You have 12 over 4, which is the same thing as 3. So if this is 3, it actually might be easier to plug this in, but I'll do it this way just in case you did as well. 4ac is going to be 4 times a times c minus b squared, which will be 12 squared, all over 4 times a. That will be 3. This is 8 times 23 will be 4, 2, and that will be 40 over 8, which is the same thing as 5. So 3, 5 is our coordinate. If this is 3, 5, here's my vertex. Going to set up my xy chart, or f of x in this case. Here's x. Here's f of x. I'm always going to need 5 points. We know that x is 3, f of x is 5. Then we go 1 to the right, 1 to the left. So if x is 2, plug that into my equation. So over here, we'll say f of 2 is going to equal 2 times 2 squared minus 12 times 2 plus 23. That'll be 4 times 2 is 8 minus 24 plus 23. And this is a negative 1 plus 8, that's a 7. So if 2 is 7, and my axis of symmetry should be always 3. I'll just write that here. It's always the same as your h is going to be x equals 3. And if there is a line, that is your axis of symmetry right down here, you should know that if I go 1 to the left and it's 7, 1 to the right should also be 7. So let's check. F of 4 equals 2 times 4 squared minus 12 times 4 plus 23. So you got 4, 7 here. So there's my first 2 points. Got to get 2 more points, so we'll go 1 to the left, 1 to the right. Let's check f of 1. F of 1 is going to be 2 times 1 squared minus 12 times 1 plus 23. That's 2 minus 12 plus 23, so negative 10 plus 23 is 13. Going to assume this is the same over here. So here's 5, and we'll go 10, 12. It's going to be somewhere up here. You can write your graphs a little bit better than mine, but you get the idea. Okay, that's number 30. Number 42, we are doing an inequality with an x cubed. Let's subtract that 2x squared first. It's greater than 0. Now that I have this, I want to factor. Actually, let's set this equal to 0 first, so we know what we're doing. I'm going to factor out an x. That's the most common factor. Now I'm going to factor, and this will always factor, at least in the problems that we are doing, to a minus 3 plus 1 equals 0. So x will equal 0, x equals 3, x equals negative 1. Setting up a number line is probably going to be the best way that you can see these intervals. So it'll be negative 1 is all the way over here. You got 0, you have 3. So my intervals over here will be negative infinity to negative 1. All are in parentheses because this is a greater than sign, not a greater than or equal to sign. Then we have negative 1 to 0. 0 to 3, and then 3 to infinity. On this side, what do we put? We're going to put our factors, our x minus 3, and our x plus 1. X minus 3, x plus 1. If I plug in something in this range, a negative 2 for instance, this will make this a negative, a negative, a negative. 3 negatives multiplied together, if you plug them in, make a negative. Plugging in, let's say, negative 1/2. This is still negative, this is still negative, this becomes positive. Negative times negative is positive times positive. We have a positive here. From 0 to 3, I'm plugging in a 1, so this will be a 1, that's positive. A negative and a positive. Two positives and a negative make a negative. And if I plug in a 4, positive, 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 overall it's going to be positive. What am I looking for? Come back to my sign up here. This is a greater than sign, so I am looking for my positive ones. So that will be this interval from -1, 0, all the way to 3, infinity, and that is a union. You could also write it in set builder notation, which would look like this: x such that -1 is less than x less than 0, or x is greater than 3. For number 43, we're dealing with rational inequalities. First point is always going to come from my restriction, which is what the bottom cannot equal. Bottom can't equal 0, so that means that x plus 3 cannot equal 0. That means if I subtract 3 from both sides, x cannot equal -3. That's my first. Now coming back to my original equation, we have x minus 5 over x plus 3 is less than or equal to 0. I'm going to change that into an equal sign, just to simplify things. I don't really have to worry about the sign until I do my ranges. So let's multiply both sides to get that x plus 3 out of the denominator. 0 times anything is always 0. These will cancel on this side, so you're just left with x minus 5 equals 0, or x just equals 5. So here's my 2 points, -3 and 5. On a number line, that would look like -3. This will look like 5. There's my 3 ranges. -infinity to -3, -3 to 5, and 5 to positive infinity. My infinities will always get a parentheses. Notice that because of this equal sign, I should be putting brackets around all of my numbers. However, because x cannot equal -3, that's my restriction. That is why I get parentheses around those two. So those are my 3 ranges. I can simply just plug in a number into any of these 3 ranges into my original equation up here, or I can do it the way that we did the previous problem. If I have x minus 5 and x plus 3, -4. If I put that in there, I get a negative, a negative, 2 negatives make a positive. If I have 0, -5 is a negative, positive 3 is a positive, which overall makes a negative, and 6 would make a positive, positive, and overall 2 positives, 1 over each other, is going to make a positive. Which one of these are less than 0? Well, it's just this one. So my answer is just -3 to 5 with a bracket here. Or in set builder, okay, that's 43. Moving on to the chapter test, f of x equals 4 times the quantity x minus 3 squared plus 5. Question like this is not exactly going to appear the same way that it will on your quiz, but if you remember, if in this form you have x minus h squared plus k, your vertex is, which is what they want you to find for a, is always going to be h comma k. So what is that in this case? It's 3, 5. So vertex of 3, 5, 5 will be right here. To graph, I'm going to say, well, what is it when x is 2 or when x is 4? When x is 4, 4 minus 1 is 1 squared. 1 times 4 is 4, plus 5 will be 9. So it'll be 4, 9, 2, 9. And if it was either 1 or 5, then I would get a negative 2 squared here. It would be 4 times 4 is 16, plus 5 is 21. Part B is going to say label the vertex. So this is the vertex right here, which is at 3, 5. Part C says draws the axis of symmetry, and the axis of symmetry is right there where x equals 3, which will just run right down the middle, and it's what makes it a mirror image of each other. And the maximum or minimum function value, well, that's 5. And this will be a minimum in this case. Number 17 is a little bit more like something you would see on your quiz again. Let's find our vertex first. Our vertex will be negative b over 2a is going to be our x-coordinate, so let's find that first. B is 4, a is 2, which is going to equal negative 4 over 4, which is just negative 1. Negative 1 is a pretty easy number to plug in here, so I'm going to do that this time instead. So f of negative 1 is going to be 2 times negative 1 squared plus 4 times negative 1 minus 6. Negative 1 squared is 1 times 2 is 2. minus 4 minus 6, which is, this is negative 10 plus 2, negative 8. So we're going to go negative 1, negative 8 is going to be our vertex. Negative 1, negative 8. So if this is negative 2, negative 4, negative 6, negative 2, negative 4, negative 6, negative 8, here's my vertex right there. 2, 4, 6, 8, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Going 1 to the right or 1 to the left will be 0 or 2. If I plug a 2 into this equation, I will get f of 2 equals 2 times 2 squared plus, negative 2. Negative 2 squared. 4 times 2 minus 6. This will be 2 times 4 is 8 plus 8 minus 6. So that'll be 16 minus 6, which will be 10. I'm sorry, again, negative 2. So this will be a negative 8, negative 6. So it'll be negative 2, negative 6, and if I plug a 0 in, same thing, I get a negative 6. So 0, negative 6, 2, negative 6, go 1 more over, so that'll be a positive 1 or a negative 3. If I plug a 1 in here, it'll be 2 plus 4, which is 6, minus 6 is 0. Same thing here. So here's my vertex. My vertex is this. My axis of symmetry will be right here, where x equals negative 1. And I have graphed the function, and that is number 17. Number 23, x squared plus 5x is less than 6. This is the third type of inequality. So we just have a quadratic equation instead of a polynomial like the ones with the x cubes, or the rational ones like x plus 3 over x minus 5, like the one that we did before. This one, we again want to get this equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 6. It's less than 0, but I can also say it's equal to 0. That's really what I'm looking for. When I factor, I'm going to get an x plus 6 and an x minus 1, and that's equal to 0, so that I know x is equal to negative 6, x is equal to 1. If I plot this on a number line, I know that this is negative 6. There's a 1 here, and those are my three intervals, from negative infinity to negative 6, from negative 6 to 1, and from 1 to infinity. So let's try a number. Negative 7, I could just plug in that negative 7 here. I could set it up the way that we did before with that chart, but it's actually pretty easy just to plug in these numbers. Number again, so the one I'm looking for is less. Notice that I put parentheses around everything because it does not have an equal sign. So this is the only one I'm looking for because it's the only one that's less than 0. So my only answer is negative 6, 1. And number 24 is probably going to require you to think a little bit more. You probably won't have a problem like this on your quiz, but we might as well try and do this anyway. Once you see it, it won't be that difficult. First, restrictions. X cannot be 0 because it is underneath the 1 here. So that's my first point. Second point, I'm going to set this equation actually equal to 0 this time. Multiplying both sides by x is going to clear my fractions for me. So multiply by distributing, this will become an x squared. The x's cancel here, so you just get a 1. 0 times x is 0. And if I factor, I get a plus 1 minus 1 equals 0. So x equals negative 1, x equals positive 1. So I have a 0, a negative 1, and a 1. Negative 1, 0, 1. Intervals will be negative infinity to negative 1. I'm going to use a bracket because it is an equal sign. Negative 1 to 0, I'm going to use a parentheses because x can't equal 0. That's a restriction. And I'm going to use a bracket again for 1. For my intervals, I'm going to test a couple of different points. In this interval, what happens if x is 2, negative 2, 1.5? So within this interval, I actually get a negative number. Moving forward, in this interval, if I plugged in a negative 1/2, 2, I actually get a positive 1.5. So this interval is going to be positive. You can kind of see where this trend is going now a little bit better. So I have a minus, plus, minus, plus. Back in my original equation, I'm looking for a greater than. So that's this, and that's it. I wish you the best of luck on your quiz. I hope you have a great spring break, and I will see you in a couple of weeks.